All right, guys, one of the first things we want to do with this is set up our viewport. So a lot of people don't actually have them set up properly, and this is really hurting your designs because you won't be able to see how things look. The first thing we need to do is go up here and make sure that you're not in studio mode. You want to go to matcap. And what this is going to do, it's going to add a lot more detail in the areas that you can't see. It'll be darker, and the areas you can see, it'll be lighter. So it'll give you a little preemptive on the ambient occlusion. That's the shadows, by the way. And I'm also going to be using the default matte cap right here. So you click on there and good to go. Next, we're totally going to want to turn on this little button right here called cavity. And it's going to show all the little cracks and crevices you can see when we click that versus when we not. It just definitely, I like working like this because it just adds so much more pre-detail to the model. So after you turn on cavity, I recommend going right here to type and selecting both. And then I need you to copy my settings that I have right here, and it'll look exactly how mine is. Okay, now we're going to move on to installing the exporter plugin from Giants. And for that, you're going to need to go to GDN website, create an account with them, and then scroll on down here to Blender Exporter Plugins 910. It just depends on what version of Blender you're using. I do believe the older versions that you see here, the version 8 and all that, are for the later versions of Blender, but you should just go with the newest one right there, download it, and then once we get it downloaded, we will install it inside Blender. Now that we have it inside Blender, we're going to go right up here to File, scroll over to Edit, and then go to Preferences. And from here, as you can see, I already have it installed, but if you didn't have it installed, you're going to go to Install. You're going to locate where you downloaded it, and let's say mine is right here. And after you have it selected, because mine's already installed, it should pop up and look up something like this. I'm going to go Giants i3D exporter. All you're going to do is check the little box right here, and then go right here to save preferences. Make sure your auto save preferences is on, which is really nice if you install an add-on and then forget to save your preferences and you go to use add-on, it doesn't work. So we're just going to hit save on our preferences. And boom, now over here on the right hand side, you'll see this little tab right here that says Giants Exporter. And I have been getting an error with their newest version. Their stuff's broke, but either way, we're going to have this big window that we'll be able to export. And going over that really quick, you can see we have a lot of check boxes here. User attributes, animation, shapes, lock group. This is kind of what I use most of the time. Just so it covers everything and doesn't cause me any issues. Now, the game location and all this stuff, as a newbie, I would not worry about this. The only thing I would worry about is going right down here to the output file, and we need to set an actual area where we want to save it. So we would just say boo, whatever, right? And when we click that, it's going to save this. When we go to export it, it'll export it to foo.i3d. And we can say if we selected this guy and hit export, or we could just select the whole scene and export everything. Okay, now let's go over some other plugins I have installed. A lot of these are available for free on Blender, but also I have a bunch of purchased ones that I can't share with you, but you can take those names and Google them and find them yourself. Such items like Kit Ops is a paid for add-on, but we can go right here, and I want you to click this box, do a search for add curve, assign shape keys. That one's going to be useful in our future tutorials. We also want to add curve tools, extra objects. If you want to add like vines and ivy and plants and stuff like that, this ivy generator is really cool. Simplified curves, I have that turned on. Ant landscape, Archie mesh. Archie mesh is for making buildings, windows, stuff like that. Bolt factory for making bolts. These are mainly just all extra mesh add-ons that I like to just turn on, and they all come stock with Blender right off the bat. If you're not going to get into animations right off the bat, you don't have to worry about the pose library. LOD Maker is a paid-for add-on, so I won't push you on that. Now, the material tool for farming, this is an old one. I'll have to get back to you later in this tutorial on installing that material editor. Import export, no, you don't need to do that one because you're not doing motion capture. Sketchpad plugin, that's a really good one. You could just do a Google search for it if you want to import models directly from Sketchfab. And auto mirror is another really good one. Generate plates, that's a paid for one. Loop tools, you need to turn that one on. That one's really useful. Node arrange and node wrangler. Mainly node wrangler. Once we start getting into textures and shading and stuff, you're going to want that one turned on. Same thing with bool tool. If cell fracture's cool, I would turn it on. It's really neat. It'll break a model up into thousands of little chunks if you wanted it. Collider tools, I do recommend this one. It is a paid for add-on. It's like $35, but it makes collisions just so easy. And then same thing with Simple Bake for baking textures. I like that program a lot. Oh, what else do I got here? A lot of paid stuff. Okay, so that's it for our basic plugins that I am using here. That I tried to cover all the free ones and tried to ignore the ones that I paid a lot of money. Okay, now let's talk about our scene here. You notice that I have a guy standing here. Now you probably actually, when you very first open up Blender, yours probably looks more like that with Cube, right? Without the guy. Now what I have done is I went inside Giants and I found a character so I could know exact heights. Because I get really, I struggle with doing the proper scaling of items. You know, sometimes I'll have a truck that's 5 times bigger than the actual human. And I've solved a lot of those issues by having this model in there. Now, I will leave this blend file in the description down below for you guys to use, and it'll actually open up with all these settings here. And when you open it up, all you have to do is come right down here to defaults. That you open up my blend file. This is if you don't have a bunch of stuff already saved, right? You open up my blend file and you're going to go save startup file after you've actually, you wouldn't have to do anything, just open it up, and then yours will look exactly like this. And then every time you start up your Blender, you'll have a little guy in there that you can move around and use as a size reference. So I kind of messed up this whole scene, right? So I moved this guy way over here, and I could move him back. I could sit here and play with this and go into my orthographic mode and there and try to get it just right in the center of the scene. Or one of the easiest tricks that you can do is, let's move him back over here. This little circle right here is your 3D cursor. And this 3D cursor, if you click up here, you can put it anywhere with a left click. And then say you wanted it right there. And then, yeah, we could snap this guy. So selection to cursor, that's a right click, go to snap, go to selection cursor, and it would move it right there. We, however, want it right in the center. So in order to get our 3D cursor back to the center, because I can't click it there right now, we're going to go Shift A, nope, wrong one, Shift S, and it's going to be cursor to world origin. Okay, so it's going to move our cursor right back there. And you also can go to, you can right click and press snap and go cursor to world origin. I just like the shortcut keys. So with our man selected here, we want him there. So the easiest way to get him there is to right click, go to snap, and we're going to go selection. With him selected, boom, now he's directly in the center of the scene. You can see right here our lines directly, and that makes it super useful. Okay, so now let's get a little bit more complex with it here. I have a cube and a guy, and I want this guy standing on top of that cube like he is king of the world. Now, you could do this, you could move him around, and if you don't have this transform configuration gizmo here, you know, maybe it looks like that, or maybe it looks this, where you don't have it at all, or selector box, just use this right here, this little side panel right here, and this is going to be your moving around, right? But we want to, instead of moving him manually like this and trying to get it just right, and then we see that his feet are sunken in, we're actually going to select the cube, and we're going to press tab to go into edit mode. Edit mode, I'm meaning up here, you can look at this tab up at the left hand. You have object, edit, sculpt, vertex. We're not going to get into most of this. We're going to stay in object mode and edit mode for right now. But in edit mode, we are going to come right up here to these 3 dots. You have vertices, edges, and faces. We want to snap his feet to a face. So we're going to select the face button. You can alternatively press 1, 2, or 3, and that'll cycle through the faces there. So with that face selected, we are going to right click, and actually, that's not going to work for us. After we right click, we're going to hold Shift and S, and we're going to go cursor to selected. Now that is going to put the cursor directly on top of that face, right? And from there, we will go back to our man here, and we are just going to go snap selection to cursor. Now he is standing perfectly there, no clipping, as long as your origin is correct. Now, what if your origin is not correct? What if your origin is, let's say, go to set origin right here. We're going to go to geometry. Okay, what if I can't do that? Because if I go to snap now, selection to cursor, he's going to look like he's stuck in the floor, right? Not so much what we want to do. So how do we fix that? We've completely messed up the geometry of this guy now. Or not geometry, but his origin point. So what I would recommend is find the point between the points that you want to make. So his flat feet, we're going to go in our orthographic mode. That's holding Alt and pressing down on your middle mouse button while you scroll left or right, and that'll put you in this orthographic mode to where you can see directly across from it, not at these angles. So we're going to come into here and we're just going to select these two faces, and I think these two faces, because they look like they're the deepest point of the shoe. And now with those two faces selected, you'll notice that our gizmo is right in the center there, which means that we can go Shift and S and go cursor to selected. But when we come out of edit mode, and by pressing tab, we'll go back into object mode, we notice that our origin is still up here. So we need to right click, set origin, origin to 3D cursor. And that will put us right back to where we were, to where we could go just like this. Snap our cursor to selected, come back up to here, go snap. It's a lot of left and clicking and all this stuff. So we messed it up and we fixed it, and that's how you mess around with origin. And the next on the topic is going to be the normals, and our normals are these little faces right here, and how they're facing outward. If we go on the inside, you'll notice that everything's red. Now, if you download my blend file, this will work out perfect for you. If it's red, the face is facing the wrong way. If it's not red, it's facing the correct way. So when you load it into Giants Editor, if everything is red, you won't be able to see it. It'll look inside out. I had this problem a lot when I first started modeling. I'd get this crazy elaborate model and it would all be inside out, and that's not good. So in order to fix that, let's mess it up first, right? So let's take a little section here, and we are going to press Alt and N. And what this is going to do, it's going to bring up our normal tabs here. We have a couple different options. We have recalculate outside, which does a decent job, and we have recalculate inside. And Blender will just assume that all faces that are facing outward are the way that they're supposed to be. And it doesn't always work, but sometimes it works. What we're going to do is we're going to mess it up. We're going to hit flip. Now, everything you see that's red right there is facing the wrong direction. If we were to load that into Giants Editor, it would not work. He would look like he got a big hole in him from an alien. Now, if you're not using my blend file, my initial blend file, your settings are not going to show this. You're actually going to have a full blue model. So what I recommend you doing, if you don't go with my blend file, you're going to go up to your preferences. And then what I want you to do is go to theme. And then the next ordeal, let me find it. Okay, so we're going to go to themes. And then once you get in themes, you're going to go to 3D viewport right here. You're going to scroll down until we find face orientation front. And normally this is going to be blue. When you very first open up Blender and you haven't messed with these settings, this will be blue. You want to click right here and change this alpha. It'll be a 1 when you're looking at it. You want to change it to a 0. And if we don't change it to a 0, everything will be blue like that. But we're going to change it there. So only the faces that are facing the wrong direction show up. This is so useful while you're modeling because you don't have to stop and go back and the actual setting to view if the faces are facing the right way are under this little tab right here where it says face orientation. And if we uncheck that, we can see that there's drastically still some difference there in our modeling, but I like to leave that on. Okay, so let's select this guy and we're going to try recalculate normal. So in Alt N again, we're going to go recalculate outside and see if it works. And you notice that it gave us some weird results there. So I don't always like to do that. What I would do is just go right back through and flip them. Oh, I dinked that one up, didn't I? Didn't I, Diddy? So essentially what happened right there is we had the whole model selected and we hit flip and everything flipped. So we don't want to do that. We want to actually select the faces that we had originally put the wrong way. And we're going to Alt-N them, flip, and then we're going to select all, and then Alt-N again to flip. And now our model is all going to be all normal when we load it in game here. Next topic, we're going to be talking about polygon count and the amount of faces and the statistic button. Now, when we have this cube selected here and we go like this, we can see that we have edges. That's what these are here. So we'll press 2 to select our edges. All right, so that's an edge. And we have our vertices. I just press 1, or you come up here to the top and you have your vertices, edge, face. All right, so I have 1 vertice selected. Okay. Now, what we want to do is see how many faces and polygons this thing has. So with the item selected, and you don't even really have to have it selected, but you can come up here to this little drop down box, and there's going to be a button called statistics. You're going to click this, and I would recommend to just have this in your normal startup file. If you download my blend file, it's already on, but you can see that there is 6 faces, 12 triangles, 12 edges, 8 vertices, 1 of 2 objects in the scene right now. So if we were to right click and press subdivide, it creates a whole bunch of new faces, edges, and vertices. And you also notice that it goes up right here. Now, Giants is pretty good. You can get quite a bit of faces going on here, but if we start jacking this up to just ridiculous amounts, let's say, I don't think it's going to let me go much more than 220. 10,000 faces and stuff like this. This isn't too bad, but if we start getting into the, I've noticed around the 120 to 150,000 triangles, this starts to cause errors in Giants and lag. So you want to try to model stuff in such a way that it isn't going to be resource intensive, especially if it's something simple like a prop. You know, you'd rather go low poly so you can have more. Now, the big question is, if you have a model already that is just ridiculously large in triangles, you can do one of 2 things. One, you can split the object up into multiple pieces to try to limit your actual faces that are going to be there, right? So we could go through and say we didn't want that part of the cube, we could just delete that part and go on from there. Or there is another route. We're going to go back to our material view or solid view really quick. Go right to here to this modifiers tab, and we're going to click add new modifier, and the word is decimate. Now what this is going to do is it's going to reduce our poly count by a lot, our triangles, what I mean here. So we'll pay attention here. We have 21,000 triangles right here. We're going to go to unsubdivide, and we notice that this face count right here, it shows that it is cutting our triangles in half. So if we were to apply this by coming here and apply or Control A, it would remove half of the faces. And we could do it one more time too, right? So we could go all the way down to where we have so many iterations of this, and you can see what it's doing to the cube. It starts doing some wonky stuff. If we were to look at that, if you look at it in edit mode, it doesn't show anything because this modifier is being applied outside of edit mode. So if we were to go in and delete some faces or something like that right here, so delete, let's go vertices. Okay, now when we do that, you can see what the effect is there. So now let's get into some basics of modeling here. And you know, we have a pretty messed up scene right here, so let's actually select this cube. We're going to press tab to go into edit mode, and we're going to make sure we are on face select by pressing 3 or coming up here to your tab. And we are, with that face selected, we're going to hit Shift S, and we're going to go cursor to selected. So now we have that bad boy selected. We're going to get out of edit mode by pressing tab, and we're going to right click. We're going to go set origin to 3D cursor. So, and then we're going to do a Shift S again, and we're going to go cursor world origin. And we're going to right click and press snap selection to cursor. There's so many steps. I wish somebody would make a plugin to just do that for me. There probably is. I just don't have it. So now our box is right in the center where we want it, so we can make a column or whatever the case may be. Let's dive into it. But what I think I want to teach you guys is let's make a walkway for this guy to walk through. So we're going to snap him to the center right there. We're going to use him as reference to try to model a doorway. And I'm going to show you how to use a couple of those plugins that we turned on there. So we're going to unselect him, select our box. We're going to double press A to select everything. Sorry, double pressing A deselects everything, A selects everything. Now with this and our origin point right there, we should be able to scroll this box up just a little bit, and you can put in exact numbers. So with it selected, you press S for scale, okay? And while you're in this mode, just your mouse is controlling it. You can actually put in some numbers here. So let's just put in 2. We want it double the size that it normally is, which is a little big. We'll press Control I to inverse select the guy to pull him out of here. And then we'll press Control I to select the box again. Control I basically selects everything in the scene that isn't selected. So if you want to select a whole bunch of parts, but you want a specific part not selected, I start off by selecting that specific part that I don't want selected, and then I press I and it selects everything else. So now that we have this cube up, we are actually going to duplicate it by holding Shift and D. So you select the object, Shift and D, and it'll give you this drag, this sort of drag feature, right? So Shift D, and you'll be able to do this with it. Don't do anything, just right click. Okay, now that we're right click, the box is still there. So we can grab it and move it, and we are going to scale it down to about the size of him, roughly. And a doorway, we could snap out a little bit of his arms there. And we want this, we want to make a tunnel through this box using what's called a bool tool. So from here, I'm going to grab this face in edit mode, and I'm going to pull this all the way over to the other side of it and extend it down just a little bit as well. So we're actually going to make a cut in this box. If you notice right now, there is no cut in that box. So what we are going to do, we're going to select our cutter. That's what this box would be called, or whatever object it is you're trying to cut out of another object. And then next, we're going to select the object that we want to cut out of. So once we have both selected, if you have the bool tool plugin turned on, you can hit Control and negative on your numpad, and what it'll do is it'll actually make a cut in the model. So let's go back into solid mode here, and how I'm switching back and forth there, guys, is you just hold Z and it'll give you this little radial wheel box here, and you have material preview, you have wireframe, and solid. For the purposes of Giants Editor and FS modding, you're probably never going to use rendered, and I wouldn't recommend it because I'm not teaching you how to use lighting and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be useless for you. I work usually out of wireframe and solid, and then material preview when I apply my materials. So with the solid selected, you can see that the bool tool was made invisible, so you can't see this box anymore. Now, however, if we move this around, you can see that it still is making the cut wherever we want it. So we're just going to hit Control Z to back it up. We want to make this permanent. So in order to make this permanent, we come and we select the object we first applied the modifier to, which is this guy right here, our last clicked item. And we can notice over here, we see B tool, cube, blah, blah, blah. And the object is set to cube 2. So it's set to this cube right here. If we were to select this, it'll tell us what cube it is. Cube 2 up here in the top left corner. Now with that selected, we can either come here and go apply or hit Control A, but we could also, there's a couple more options we can hear. We can hit union, and it'll actually bring these two together. So say you want to make some models for 3D printing, which have to be airtight and stuff like that. You could join these models together using union, or we can press intersect, and we can see that it will just give us the portion where this cube is touching the other cube. It's a good way to extract stuff, but we want to stick with difference, and we're just going to hit apply. Okay, so now this, if we were to delete this little area right here, it is now permanent. We can go through and select each one of these individual faces. Now, it looks too rigid to me, so I'm going to teach you how to use the bevel tool. And the bevel tool, we're going to go to the edge select mode by pressing 2 or up here in the top left corner. And we're going to select these edges that are in this hallway right here. And I want you to hit Control B. Control B is going to bring up this little line with my cursor you see right here. And as I pull away from my initial spot, you can see that it's starting to bevel the area. And if we do our mouse scroll up, down, left, right, if you go like this, you can add more faces to it, make it a real smooth tunnel. You know, more faces, more polygons, more PC power. So keep that in mind when you're modeling this stuff, especially if you're making lots of them. You know, you might overwhelm the user's PC by doing that. So we're actually going to make this just a single face bevel like this. Okay, so now we have kind of a tunnel going on here, right? That he can walk through. And he might see it's a little too short. So we can come back in, select this face here. We'll press 3 to face select. We can actually raise this up just a hair so he actually fits in there properly. And you can still make a lot of these edits to the model. This is all called destructive modeling because you can't go back. Now, if we wanted to make this non-destructive, we could just edit the cube that we use to make this. I'm going to select both these faces here. And I'm going to hit Control-Shift-B and see what that does. Control-Shift-B is going to bevel the ends of it. You see how it's doing this kind of a... If you were going for like a sci-fi look or something like that, you could get... You know, it definitely does some weird stuff with the polygons. So if you start getting weird stuff like that, you see how you can see the lines? We're just going to hit right-click and go Shade Smooth, and it definitely goes away quite a bit. It's not the best topology, but it is another bevel tool that I learned, and you can scroll up and down to add more faces in that as well. Next, I'd like to model some props to put on this, whatever the heck it is we made, right? But my scene's really cluttered. Now, I could just build right on top of this and do my own thing, but one of the better ways I recommend doing that is for us to learn about collection. So currently, this model and this guy, we look over here in our scene collection, they are in this collection. So we're just going to call this collection building. Okay. Now, I want to model something. I'll model something really quick and show you, but I don't want to have to deal with working around this guy. I'd rather use the origin. That way I could use this orthographic mode. But if I'm modeling in the direct center, I can't actually see the dang thing because this box is in the way. So what we can do is come right up here to building. We're going to press this little eyeball button and it'll hide that collection. So if we were to create a new mesh here, cube, it's actually going to create that on the outside of the collection. And it would be there if we were to unhide everything. You can also press H to hide stuff and Alt H unhide stuff. But we want this cube in its own collection. So we can design it up to be some type of prop. In order to do that, we need to have the object selected or objects, and we're going to press M, and it's going to say move to collection. Make sure you're in object mode when you do this. So we're going to create a new collection. We're going to call this prop. Okay, and from there, you'll notice on the top right up here that it moved our cube into the prop. So now we can hide that or unhide it, but this will allow us to work directly out of here and model something. So I'm going to model something really quick, and then I will get back to you. All right, so I have a catwalk railing that I have modeled from prior versions here, and we are going to try to snap this to this object here. So in order to get our snapping working, you're going to come to the top up here. It might be on the bottom for you, but if you're using my blend file, it'll be at the top. We're going to click on this little magnet, and then we're going to click on the drop-down box, go to face. Now, when we do this object snapping, which we'll see right here, we notice that it's actually snapping to the building like how we want it. We want it to be up here. So if you press G, G will allow you to grab it and put it anywhere. We actually want it to be up here, but it's being weird, right? It's snapping, but it's being very odd. So we're going to change some snapping features here because we want this to snap at the base, not at the rest of it. So we're going to unselect that. We're going to come back up here, and we are going to select Align Rotation to Target. And then we are going to next select Snap with Center. Now this is what it's going to do. It's going to snap to the center, right where you see that little dot at. If not before, it was just doing it at the other spot. But when we go like this, you'll notice that it's on top now. Let's go take a look at it, and it looks pretty good. So let's see if we can put it on the side. And when we go to the side, you notice that it aligns to the target like that. Now this works really good. There's a tutorial I watched where a guy was making a mine for like a sea mine, and he was adding stuff all over the side of it. I'll show you right now. Okay, now essentially with the snapping, I have this little doohickey right here. We're gonna press G to grab it, and then you see now with those settings activated, we can, it's placing so much better. So we can click there, we can do a Shift D to duplicate, we can put another one right there, Shift D to duplicate right there, Shift D, and oh, that one's a little bit funky. It obviously placed on the face wrong. But you can very quickly, like, look at this, just in a matter of seconds, we made some type of mine setting. And that is going to be your snapping. All right, next on our agenda, we're going to talk about shading. And one of the best ways to cover this is I have these objects here, right? So we were just working on this mine, but you notice it doesn't really look like a ball. Okay, you got all these faces here, and if you were to bake these textures, those lines would come in it. So we are actually going to fix some of this stuff. Now, what you can do is with the object selected in object mode, right click, and you're going to be brought up these options here of shade smooth, shade auto, and shade flat. Now, because this is a circle, an orb, we are going to shade smooth. And you'll see a little bit of lines in there, but it'll definitely help out a lot. And if we were to auto smooth that, it does relatively the same thing. Auto smooth is more for objects like this, to where if we were to shade smooth, you notice it doesn't look good. It looks pretty ugly, especially where the lines are supposed to be. And that's because it's shading everything flat or smooth. And we want it to shade some of the model flat and some of the model smooth. The best way to do that is to right click and go to auto smooth. Auto smooth is going to do exactly what we just want, and we're going to get rid of those lines. Now, if we were to go to shade flat, you can see it looks almost identical to when we first started. So we'll go back to shade smooth. Now let's look at this cube. What happens when we do a shade smooth? It makes it look very ugly, and it's going to look excessively glossy when we pull it into Giants Editor. So on most cubes or block type objects, shading flat is going to be your best option. And then when we look at cylinders, I struggled from this issue a lot when I first started modeling. Essentially, I would pull in some poles or something like that into Giants Editor, and I would see all these lines, and it just looks terrible. It doesn't look like a pole, right? So in order to get that going, let's first see what shade smooth looks like. It looks horrible. It does the sides perfectly, but the tops should be flat. So if we go to auto smooth, it looks how it's supposed to look. And you could, when you make these cubes, make a new one really fast. You'll notice right down here it says add cylinder, and it's actually going to give you a whole bunch of settings that you can change. So if you wanted to add more faces in this, I'm going to zoom in on it. We can go right to here where it says vertices, and you can see that when we turn it up, you can naturally get rid of all that, all those artifacts. But if we were to pull it down, you can see we almost make a triangle out of it. So just to recap on this, we're looking at this mine right here. This sphere needs to be set to smooth. Now these right here, if we were to set these to smooth, they look ugly. And if we set them to flat, they'll look like how they did when we first made it. We don't want that. We want auto smooth. And you can see the difference just between those 2 points right there. That looks so much better. And for the most part, that is going to be your introductory to shading. So make sure you're doing, if you're doing more complex objects like that, you definitely want to use auto smooth. If you're doing boxes, you're going to use flat, and so on. Now with shading out of the way, let's get into a little bit more advanced modeling techniques here. Now that we know how to properly shade our stuff once we start editing it. So we're going to go into edit mode here, and we're going to make sure we're on face select. We're going to select this face. Actually scale this down a little bit. And when you're scaling items, go up here to item. You can see if it's scaled or not. You see this 0.30, 0.30, 0.30. That means, and if I was to scale it, that stuff changes. In order to set that in stone, because if you import it into Giants, it's going to keep those numbers. Don't want that. So I believe it's Control A while you have the object selected, and you can set, you can apply the scale, the rotation, and the location. We're just going to do scale for right now. And you'll notice that that ones it out right there. So that is the real and true size of this. This becomes increasingly important if you start parenting things together. And parenting, let's go over parenting really quick. So I just duplicated this object. I'm going to select this object first, and I'm going to hold shift, and I'm going to select this object next. I'm going to hit Control P, and we're going to do object keep transformation. Now, when I move this cube, it's actually moving both, but they are still two separate objects. If I was to move this one, it doesn't do anything. This is more, this is how you start getting into animations and stuff like that most of the time. But that is parenting. And if we look over here, we can actually see that this cylinder 5 is the parent of cylinder 6. Now, if we wanted to clear that parent, we select on cylinder 6. We're going to hit Alt and P, and that's going to clear parent. And most of the time, I like to clear parent and keep transformation. If not, this object may go elsewhere. So keep parent, and now it is no longer parented to that object, so we can move this around without messing anything up. Now, let's go in and actually move this to a new collection. We're going to call it test for the heck of it. And we are going to, the rest of this stuff, I want it to disappear, and I only want to see this test collection. So these items currently are not in a collection. So we're actually going to highlight them all, click and drag and drop them into the props collection, and then they will disappear. I want this to be in the center, so we'll go to Snap, Selection to Cursor, and we're going to press the decimal button on the numpad, and that should align us to the target here. And you can do that align with any of these faces. So if you select a face, it'll zoom in on that face, or vice versa over there. This makes for getting around Blender a lot easier. So in our edit mode, you're going to select this top face, and we're going to cover a few little tricks. Now, the first one is going to be your normal extrude. Extruding. So with that face selected, we're going to tap E, and we have a snapping on right now. So with snapping on, it's going to be funky like this. We're actually going to come up here and turn this off, but we have our face now, right? And we could actually select all these too and press extrude again. 1.2. There we go. I think that'll work. Oh, I didn't even have to click scale. 1.2. Okay, so that gives us a, but it's kind of dinked up right there. I do believe you can kind of go through and play with it. There's probably a quicker way. I don't know it all with Blender, but I'm definitely trying to share what I do know with you guys. But now we have kind of a lip on there, right? And let's say, I don't know what it is what we're making. Let's make a Super Mario tunnel. So the next thing with this top face selected, we're going to press I. And I is going to do kind of the same as extrude, but a little bit different. It's actually going to create a whole new set of faces here that we can scroll in and out. And we're just going to go right to the edge of this. Okay, now we're going to press the E button and pull down for extrude. And this is going to be the tunnel that Mario goes in, right? So now we have our tunnel here, but it's a little rigid around the corners. So what we could do is come right to this edge. We are going to hold Alt and click on an edge. If you hold Alt and click on an edge, or hold Alt and click on a face, it'll select all those faces in that. And then if you were to hold Shift and Alt, you could actually sit here and select different sections. So something like that, right? But we don't want that. Let's put a little lip on here. Just kind of start extruding stuff. Okay, so now we're going to go back to this edge here. And we're going to hit Control B to bevel. And if we scroll up and down on our mouse wheel, we can control the bevel. We don't want to be too crazy, but just enough. So now we have Super Mario's tunnel. So what I did is I actually added this tunnel to the building, right? And I even cut a little hole and all that stuff with some of the tools I showed you before. But I ran into this issue to where obviously we know that these faces are facing the wrong way, but I need to connect this whole loop right here. You can see it selected the edge. Got to make sure we get it all here. Make sure we get every last little face. Maybe we can go into wireframe mode, make sure we have everything selected. Those look weird. Okay, and then next, I want to select the edges around here. So holding Shift and Alt will give me that full circle. Let's just make sure we got everything. Sweet. And we can, with those edges selected, we're going to come up here to Edge, and we're going to go Bridge Edge Loops. It really messed some stuff up, but it's because we had double faces selected. So if you get to this, but you're like, man, I really need that edge selected, I would just go through and manually delete it. And I did this because I knew this model was going to be messed up, and this was just a good chance to show you the Select All tool. When you're in edit mode, press C, and let's not select all, but it's like a brush select. And we're going to come down here and make sure we get all the faces that we want to delete. This is just a lot easier than manually going through and clicking every single one of them like that. So with all those selected, we're going to hit X for delete faces. Okay, and we didn't get them all, right? So we got to go through and make sure we get these ones here. This is perfect because a lot of models that you're going to download are going to be really messed up. And you might have to go through and do this. So with these faces selected, same thing. We're going to go face select. Now this is really jacked up. Might be better to just remake this whole thing. But for the time being, I really want to show you how to delete stuff. Make sure we get every last little face here. And X. Look got one more here. X. Now we're doing pretty good, but we have these edges right here. Do you see these edges? We're going to go up to the edge select. We're actually going to select these two edges, and we're going to go delete. That one up. We're going to go X and edges delete. Edges fucking delete again. There we go. Why is that button? I have some weird dysfunctional stuff going on here. More edges. That's why. X and edge. And now all of those should be out of there. We are going to recalculate our auto smooth really fast. I'm going to go to Object, Create Smooth, and then do Auto Smooth. And we still have some vertice edges right there. That's for more of an advanced tutorial, but I wanted to show you how to delete faces, edges, and vertices. So we have an edge selected right there. You just press X to delete it, and it would delete all the faces that are connected to that. We're just going to go on that there. Or if we were to do vertices, you could go through and delete the X and V, and would delete everything that's touching that vertice. But that's the basics of deleting stuff if you dink up, which I did right here. I dinked up big time. It's all good though, right? You know, I've been really reluctant to make a tutorial on Blender because I just want to be downright honest with you. I am a noob with this still, but I've learned the tricks needed to get stuff to work in Blender. I'm not saying this is the correct way to do anything in Blender. I am no pro at it, but I do hope this video is finding you well and at least helping you. So I apologize for any fumbling, but like I said, I've really held back from making a video. That way I didn't trip over my words while I was trying to explain stuff to you guys. So our main goal next is to add some materials, UV map it, and export it. Now there's a lot more in Blender that we could learn how to do, but I'm going to try to keep this a basic tutorial, and then I will do some advanced stuff in the future. So let's go into our materials tab. So with our object selected here, right? So we have it selected. We're going to go to this little material button over here. So click on that. We're going to click Add New. Okay, now this, if we go to our material preview by holding Z, and it brings up this menu, now we can see this material. If we were to change the color here, boom, and so on, whatnot, roughness is going to make it like chrome, and so a 0 of roughness will make it really shiny, and a 1 of roughness will make it completely flat. Now, when you import it into Blender and stuff like that, it's going to be at 50, so it's going to be a mixture of both. But what we want to do is do some UV mapping here. So with everything selected, we are going to press U in edit mode. And then there's a couple different ways you can unwrap stuff, but we're going to start off with the Smart UV project. And when you do this, I like to put an island margin of at least 0.1. I struggle because sometimes it breaks up my model really crazy like. Now we applied that and we can't really see what we're doing. So we can come up here. Now we're going to get into this bar up. I've avoided this so far in the tutorial because there's a lot going on up here. We're going to go to UV editing. Gonna bring up this menu right here, and I like to change it back to material preview. That way, if I'm applying materials, I can actually see what material is what. So if we were to, let's go to our layout really fast. I'm just gonna apply some materials using our asset browser. So let's go into here, and we need to select some faces. So we're gonna add a couple more materials. We'll add like a rubber, and we'll add a metal and a base. So we're going to call this one the base material. We're going to call this one a new one, called it rubber. And then we'll do metal. Okay, so now we have all of this assortment of stuff here. And if we were to click on a face, it'll actually highlight what the material is on here. So when we click here, it highlights it. But when we click here, it doesn't highlight anything. That's because these are not UV unwrapped or assigned to anything. So what we're going to do, well, actually they're UV unwrapped, but they're not assigned currently. So we could actually come right over here, and when you highlight a face in edit mode and you press L, it's going to select linked, and you can select whatever you want. So if you want to do normal, you want to do material, seam, sharp, UVs. For currently, because this isn't a material, it's going to highlight everything for us. So, but we want to turn that to a metal, right? So that one's going to be a metal. Let's change our color in here so we can definitely see the difference between these two. And then for the remainder of this, I want to select the lips here. We're going to scroll right down in here, and holding Alt and Shift and select right on the line, and it'll select that whole ring. Right? And then you can slowly click on each one. There is some shortcut codes to do this faster. I just can't remember them. We're going to make that whole lip right there rubber. So we'll click on here, click assign, and now that's rubber. Let's change it like this. Now I actually have some materials in here to make this a little bit more realistic. So we're going to use my materials I currently have. We're going to change that one to rubber, and I have an aluminum brush for metal. And then I have a, let's go with a, I don't even freaking know, for a wall. Let's make it a rock for our sandy thing. And you can see in here that the textures have been applied, and because of the UV unwrapping. Now, if we were to, this obviously one needs to be UV unwrapped. So we're going to select all the material there, and we want to make that the sandy concrete as well. And then the inside of the tunnel, we need to make sure that the inside of the tunnel is a material, and it is. It is the aluminum brushed. Now this should be, at this point, retractable. But we're going to take a look at the UVs and see how you can change this stuff a little bit. So when we pull out here and we select everything, we're going to be up here are your different materials. And it's not going to auto select most of the time for you. So let's say we wanted to change the positioning of the stone, or make it bigger, smaller, whatever the case may be. So make sure we're on material selected. So it selected all of the stone, and over on the left is my UV map, my unwrapping. Now there is a tool that I recommend you get on. It's an add-on, and we didn't cover it because we're not covering vehicles right now. But it is a material selector for vehicles, and this allows you to move the UV maps. Because Giants, basically, if you were to go down one, this is color selectable. This is how you make stuff color selectable for vehicles. And this is color selection 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Now, if we wanted to do silver bumpy, we would just click there. Now, everything is going to be silver bumpy if we use the vehicle shader. We are not going to be using the vehicle shader, though, this one. So we're going to select our faces, move it down, and here. Now, if you're putting stuff on ModHub, this is not going to work for you because Giants will flag you for it. But if you are just doing this for personal or for PC mods, I like to scale. So to get a better resolution on the texture, we're going to scale it. Now we need to make sure our 3D cursor is right here in the corner. And if we don't have that, we can always go, not save, we can always go right up to here. And this little, it's called the pivot point. And we want it to pivot from the 3D cursor. If we don't, it'll just scale it normal. So we're going to scale up here, and I'm going to press 2. Now, like I said, if you're putting this on ModHub, they're probably going to flag you for this. But if you're personal use, not a big deal. You can see that the texture there is actually getting better resolution. and it's not looking so blocky, and as long as you have a good texture, it should look okay. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing with the metal in here, because I just know my metal texture looks a hell of a lot better scaled. You can see right here that it's very tiny on the metal thing. So when we go to do metal, let's do our aluminum brushed worn. Very simple. We're going to choose the scale right here, and we're just going to go to 3 as well. And then we're going to do the same thing with the rubber, because you can see the rubber. We're actually going to unwrap that a little bit more. I'm going to go cube projection on this one, and that's going to basically project it as a cube on a box here. And then from there, we're going to hit scale up 2, 3, whatever it is you want. And now everything should have better resolution on their textures. Now you can manually place these as well. If we have this face selected in the UV editor here and we go G to move it around, we can actually place it wherever we want. This is really useful if you're making like computer screens or decals and stuff like that. You would be manually placing them. So even though it works, as long as you're not uploading the mod hub to scale it, you do not want to exceed the boundaries of this L right here. If the material is over here, just outside of this imaginary L right here, I seem to get a lot of errors when I go to export out of Blender. So I like to keep all of my UV wrapping, just imagine an imaginary L right here, and everything needs to be on this side of it. Okay, let's get into exporting here. There's a ton more in Blender that I would love to show you, but this is already getting to be a long tutorial, and I want this to be digestible, and so expect more in the future. So some prepping before I import into Giants. I like to go back to my layout mode, and I will look up here at scale under the item box. If you don't have it, you can come up here and click item, and it'll show this. You can see our scale is 2 times the size that it should be. So what I'm actually going to do is have the object selected, press Control and A, and we're just going to apply that scale. So now you can see it's 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, we are ready to export at this point. So let's open up our Giants tab here. And we already have a location set up, our coup, under my documents. So it's already set up. When we hit export selected, it's going to export this whole model right here. And if we encounter any errors, it's going to show up in this very, very small little tab down here underneath all this. You'll see an error, could not do this. And sometimes it tells you what was wrong, sometimes it doesn't. If you can't figure out, try to export less objects. Don't try to export a whole car, with the wheels. You might run into a lot of issues that way. Just try to do piece by piece or sections. That way, if you encounter an error, you can fix it. So let's hit export. This should be in i3D now somewhere, and it has applied all of these settings. If there was an animation, it applied the shapes, binaries, user attributes, UVs, it exported all that information. Let's go find it and see what it looks like. So now I have it opened up in Giants Editor, and you can see it imported the model in just fine. You still have that little bit of fallacy that I was pointing out earlier, but for simplicity's sake, I'm not going to dwell on it. Like I said, I'm not the best modeler out there, but we definitely made whatever the heck this is. I'm really good at that, just making random crap. But one thing we do notice is the textures aren't applied. And that's because I did not show you guys that part. It gets very confusing, and you can expect that in a later episode, because most people don't know how to apply textures in Blender, so they transfer over and you don't have to manually apply them like you would do here. So if we manually went through and let's go find my, I think that's no, that's under the Mars texture pack materials. Yeah, sandy concrete. So as you can see, it's all good. But one thing it didn't do, it actually didn't export our materials out, because our material is still default. Not sure why it did that. I must have missed a button. Let's go back and look and see what we did wrong. So while I'm building my Invasion pack and my Mars pack, I have a folder with textures that I work out of. And where we saved this file, those textures weren't actually at. So when Giants transferred, accepted the transfer, these materials did not have anything to make them unique. So what Giants does, it actually merges all the materials if they don't have unique file paths associated with them or unique colors. So a fast fix to this, if you're not using textures in Blender, and I haven't taught you that yet, so you're probably not, you can come right up here, and we're actually just going to hit this remove material, or sorry, we're going to hit this X right here, and it's going to remove that part of it. Then we're going to click new, and we're going to change the color to like yellow. And then we're going to do the same thing on rubber. We're going to create a new material. We're just going to make that pink, and then change this as well. Remove it, add that one to be like blue. And there's a method behind my madness here, and I'll show you. So let's hit export again, and then we're going to hit reload.
It was at this moment he knew. He fucked up.
So what ended up happening right there is I actually didn't have the whole model UV unwrapped, and that confused Blender. So I just went back through, highlighted everything, unwrapped it, did cube projection, and then now when I import it into here, it actually shows the differentials on the textures. I had to go through and play with it a couple times. That's actually a new one for me. So if it isn't UV unwrapped completely and you're not, and your materials aren't showing up, do you see how we have two different materials now? Before I couldn't get it to work. It's because the section of the model wasn't unwrapped, and it was confusing the old Giants editor. I had to go through and remove some of the materials just because I was kind of lazy to do it all again. But we do have multiple materials applied here. We have the rubber right there, and then also the concrete, and voila, basically made a, don't know what it is, but it works. I taught you some multiple tools and how to get stuff from Blender, how to set up your Blender. And if you enjoyed this, please let me know. And if I get enough people that enjoyed this, I will make a advanced tutorial with some other cool stuff that I've learned.